Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. So we've been discussing bills about election reform, and there are a couple out there. However, there are those who believe that the motor voter aspect, registering to vote at the DHSMV, is at the heart of many of the problems we're facing. Unfortunately, that's national law, and we really don't have anything to do about it. Uh, but today we're going to look at the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 as it was amended in 2024. And you guessed it, Mike Levine is going to have a lot to say about it. Good morning, Mike.
Hey, Chuck. It's great to be with you today.
There you
Isn't it
go.
interesting as you peel back the onion on all this legislation? And of course, every time you read legislation, we're focusing on the state legislature primarily these days. But of course, Chuck, we do have influence over our federal legislators too. So if somebody said we want to repeal the National Voter Registration Act, I would have no problem with that at all. And, that's what our Congress and senators are for. So I just want to say out of the box that the idea that helping people vote by making voter registration available at Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles offices. Oh, and we can get into the other places that the National Voter Registration Act requires states to make voter registration available and all the other various different nuances about it. But that's really not the problem, Chuck. It's not that somebody can go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and register to vote. It's all of the, basically, it's the method of transmitting data back and forth. And also, something we may not cover today, if I don't say it right now, is that the National Voter Registration Act actually says that the only use for the information that's gathered at locations mandated by the act is for the purpose of voter registration and voter registration alone, and that would be and it's confidential, private, and will be used for nothing else. And that's in the law of the National Voter Registration Act. So goes to my point that registering to vote at the DMV um, may not be the actual problem, but it has farther reaching ramifications, Chuck. So again, as you take a look at the legislation that is proposed in the Florida House and the Florida Senate, um, in conjunction with the National Voter Registration Act, does the place where the applicant provides their identification and all of the various things they need in order to verify their eligibility to vote, are we scanning those documents? Are those documents available if they need to? If the supervisor of elections, for example, needs to go back and verify, which it's their job to verify every single voter registration in the first place. So they should be doing this with every single voter registration, looking at their passport or birth certificate or whatever they use to register to vote. And then the next step becomes that the law we're in front of right now, Senate Bill 1334 and the House Side 991, shares all the information with the Secretary of State's office, which, of course, the Secretary of State is deemed to be the primary person responsible for elections in Florida. So, okay, now you have a basis for the reason that we're using all this information. And then when you get into 991 that we covered on Thursday, Chuck, it also says in the National Voter Registration Act that choosing not to update your voter registration is confidential. So, of course, in 991, the Department of Motor Vehicles is required to notify the Department of State if the applicant chooses not to update their voter records. And that could be inconsistent with the National Voter Registration Act. So while these laws reference the National Voter Registration Act and the Help America Vote Act, HAVA, and maybe it's our job to police the policemen, which would be our legislators, because this is the legislature's actual job, is to police the executive branch of the government, which is the Department of State. And if it is to be confidential, according to the HVRA, that choosing not to update your voter record at the Department of Motor Vehicles is to be confidential, then we could have a problem with the law, Chuck. So maybe we need to look into that. Maybe, so I'll turn the floor back over to you to kind of take us where we need to go from here.
Well, I guess the first question is we just jumped right into the NVRA, but is there a comment or a statement we need to make to define what the NVRA is? What is this National Voter Registration Act? It was passed in 1993. It was
Who was the
updated in
president in
2020.
1993, Chuck?
I'm sorry.
Who was the president of the United States in 1993?
Oh, I'd have to go back and think
I'm
about
pretty sure it
that.
was Bill Clinton. I'll let you off the hook. I'm pretty sure it was Bill
I'm
Clinton,
thinking,
right?
yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
Right.
And
So this is all when you get into it, Chuck. And what is the National Voter Registration Act? The National Voter Registration. Oh, and by the way, um, the information on this is in the Department of Justice website, and the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice is the division that enforces this law because it's considered to be a civil rights law, right? The right to vote is a civil right. And so getting into the question, why would you pass the NVRA? The argument is, as we constantly war with the left over voter rules and laws, is to make it easier for people to register to vote. Okay, if you want to accept that at face value, I would suggest, particularly in SB 1334 and House Bill 991, that the state of Florida is actually beyond. I mean, you could use the word lightly, encouraging people to register to vote, and that's fine if you want to do that. I personally am not interested in encouraging people to register to vote. If people don't want to vote, they should not have to vote. We're not obligated to vote. So if somebody does not want to vote, I'm not interested in pressuring them to register to vote. But I would suggest that HB 991 particularly does pressure people to register to vote. And then of course, let me just tell you that I was speaking with some activists who are lobbying the legislature on these bills right now. And I'm hearing that because these activists were successful in getting some provisions removed from these bills that they don't like, which they share my point of view as it relates to the election laws, that the Secretary of State is now going back to the sponsors of these bills, Senator Grahl and Representative Persons Mullica, and they're complaining that the legislators are removing pertinent things from the bill that the Secretary of State wants in the bill. So we have a Secretary of State in the state of Florida who wants to collect a lot of data on people, and they want control of the elections at the state level, Chuck. So I'm going to just stop there for a second to let us digest that and give you a chance to ask me to clarify anything that I may have moved too quickly over. Would you like to do that?
well, the idea of encouraging people to register to vote, I think, is a good thing. Pressuring them to do it, I don't know if we could go that far. The one of the things that I'm not sure if we're going to get to this either was for me that jumped out is where are what locations is the federal government demanding that the state utilize to get people to vote, And literally, it's anywhere where you're going to be using any kind of government benefit, welfare, food stamps, everything that those people who are really struggling in our nation, wherever they are, that's where they want to register people to vote. And I mean,
Absolutely.
again, we all have a right to vote, but they're certainly not putting these things into. Uh, they're not demanding that we have it in schools, in high schools or colleges. They're demanding that they have it in welfare offices, and I don't know. That just kind of rubbed me wrong.
Okay. And I just want to throw in that the National Register to Vote Act also prohibits um, the pressuring of people to register at these distribution points for the voter registration application, Chuck. So anytime people pressure people, which is kind of subjective, right? What is pressure? That would be a violation of the National Voter Registration Act. So we have to be careful about the way we write this legislation to make sure that we don't put people in a situation or the government, the state of Florida, in a situation where we find ourselves, pressuring people to register to vote, giving them a negative self-image of any kind if they choose not to register to vote, or just as importantly, if they choose not to update their voter registration when they go make changes to their driver's license or receive benefits or whatever it is that they're doing. So, again, this to me is the heavy hand of government. I personally believe, going back to the original question, why was the National Voter Registration Act passed in the first place? I believe that it is to um, pollute our voter rolls with inactive voters. People who have to be encouraged to register to vote don't vote. So therefore, we've got a whole lot of voter registrations sitting on our voter rolls of inactive voters, which in our world of technology, we know those voter rolls are being used and manipulated in order to submit fraudulent ballots, particularly by mail, where people are utilizing um, voter registration numbers that have a history of not voting and then sending out mail out ballots to those locations to addresses that are not verifiable. And then those ballots get voted, particularly by mail in ballots. So having a cache of voter registrations on the books where people don't vote consistently opens the door to fraud. And I believe that back in 1993 was the impetus, number one, getting people to register to vote whose vote can be manipulated, like the left um, uh, so efficiently does. And of course, I believe the right is starting to catch up a little bit since 2020. But so I believe that's it. Padding the voter rolls is a big piece of the puzzle. Getting people to register to vote who is highly probable they're going to vote your way left because of the benefits and the safety net systems that we have here in the country is the reason that the National Voter Registration Act was passed. And of course, with technology, I have a bunch of solutions to that, Chuck, how we should be doing this. And one of my solutions would be that people should be able to register and actually vote online, provided they're sitting in front of a notary, free notary provided by the state, in which they have to present their credentials in order to vote. Of course, that's very unpopular. I'm sure that if I said that to Alexandria Ocasio Cortez or something, she'd probably have a heart attack. But the National Voter Registration Act also specifically states that you cannot be required to sit in front of a notary in order to register to vote. So I found that to be pretty interesting as my mind went to the idea that having, especially with video conferencing and everything, as I said before in our previous video, online notarization can be done for real estate transactions today. So why can't we just, if somebody wants to vote remotely, why can't they just go online, present a copy of their, hold their passport up to the camera, hold their driver's license up to the camera, hold their birth certificate up to the camera, and be verified and vote. And that could solve a lot of problems, Chuck. But of course, we need to work through the details on that. But in closing, the National Voter Registration Act prohibits the state from requiring someone to sit in front of a notary in order to register to vote, Chuck.
Yeah, another interesting thing, right at the beginning here, is that there are a half a dozen states that aren't covered by the NVRA: Idaho, Minnesota, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. They're exempt from the
That's an interesting
NVRA
subject.
because on and after August 1st, 1994, they either had no voter registration requirements or had election day voter registration at the polling with respect to the elections for federal offices. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that potentially six states don't have voter registration requirements. So I guess you just show up, right? Provide some kind of ID or something, or I don't know. I don't know how they would do that. I mean, you have to look into it. You can speculate as to how they do it. I don't know. But it is interesting that have no voter registration requirements whatsoever, or you can register to vote on election day. And I'm going to say to you, Chuck, that I really don't have a problem registering people to vote on election day as long as they produce their credentials and leave a copy behind. So if we ever wanted to audit that registration, we would have a birth certificate or passport or a state issued ID that indicates citizenship. I'm not opposed to registering people to vote on the day of the election if they provide the credential. Now, I'm sure that's controversial on our side, but I'm willing to discuss it, right? Why not? I mean, if somebody wants to vote and they're willing to come in, prove their citizenship, prove their address, prove the precinct where they live, let them register to vote and vote. I don't have a problem with that. But administratively, now at the polling place, you're going to have a lot more labor there. You're going to have a lot more resources there in order to register to people to vote on election day, Chuck.
Yeah, I'm not all that excited about that, but
Oh, I'm not
you know,
either. I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, just saying, I mean, if we solved all the other problems, then registering to vote on election day would not be a big problem. But when we have this is what really bothers me, Chuck. When we have elected officials who game the voter registration policies and procedures, and that's the root of the problem, Chuck. I mean, if we were governed by moral men, we would not have these problems, but we're not. So I will tell you another thing. I called into Senator Grawl's office the other day, and I was chatting with one of her legislative aides, and I told the aide, I said, the problem we have is that, informed grassroots voters don't trust the Secretary of State. And I'm telling you right now, Chuck, I not only do not trust the Secretary of State, I believe the Secretary of State is a bad guy. I believe that the Secretary of State maliciously uses these voter procedures in order to achieve nefarious things via his office. So I also noticed as I was strolling through the legislation online, as I was researching 1334 and 991, that there was a bill proposed to change the Secretary of State position from an appointed position to an elected position. And I highly support that legislation, which I believe has already been disposed of in the Florida legislature, but I'll have to go back and verify that, Chuck.
well, obviously we're not going to get nearly through this entire bill, but
No way. No
uh,
way.
we probably should at least look into the requirements for the national mail voter registration application, people who want to vote by mail. Um, is there anything you want me to?
I think, Chuck, I think you're missing that. I think the National Voter Registration Act requires people to be able to register by mail, not
Yeah,
vote by
yeah.
mail.
I misquoted on that, misstated that.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
a big difference, as I'm sure you
yeah,
will agree.
absolutely right.
Voting by mail and registering to vote by mail are two different things.
Right. Right, there we go.
Right,
Mail voter registration application. And
right.
they're saying here that it may require only such identifying information and other information that is necessary to enable the appropriate state election official to assess the ability of the applicant and to administer voter registration and other parts of the election process. So it's limiting or minimizing the amount of information on this particular bill form.
Yeah. Basically, what you just said is that the information that the elections official can require has to go to eligibility. So they want to know that you're a citizen of the United States. They want to know, they want to be able to verify your address so they can put you in a precinct. And they want to verify, of course, the problem with that is that um, proving a negative is not required here. So, for example, if you're convicted of a felony and you have not satisfied um, all of the requirements of your sentence, then you are not allowed to vote. And somebody could omit that document that says, I am a felon, and be registered to vote just simply because they mailed in, whatever it is, their birth certificate, passport, whatever the case might be. They may be able to satisfy all of the criterion of eligibility, but not provide the information about ineligibility, which would be mental incapacitation, a felony with um, outstanding things to be done before satisfying your sentence, things like that, that would make someone ineligible. So, yeah, that's a concern, right, Chuck? So, let me just ask you, when somebody, let's just say, because it is true that you have to be able to register to vote by mail. So let's say somebody fills out the voter registration by form, and they put in a copy of their, let's just say they put their copy of their driver's license in there, and they put a copy of their birth certificate, and you would say that the driver's license establishes residency, and the birth certificate establishes citizenship. Is that all we need, Chuck, or should we have something else?
Well, that would work, but I don't think that's what's being required here. And I've been involved in several voter registration drives where we have the form sitting on our table at a fair of one sort or another, and people come up to us and they want to register to vote. They don't show us anything. All they do is check the little box saying that they're citizens. And it looks to me like that's pretty much the situation here, as stated in this bill, that all they have to do is, under penalty of perjury, just tell them they're a citizen. So I think what we have in one or the other of those bills, I can get them confused pretty easily. They're at least being forced to provide something.
Agreed. And it actually says in the National Voter Registration Act that when a new registrant who has never registered before votes for the first time, they must present qualifying documents on their first time voting. And then the only exception to that would be if the voter provides those qualifying documents to the supervisor of elections, let's just say, before going to the polls. So even in the NVRA, which is a 1993 document, Chuck, in the National Voter Registration Act, it required that first-time voters provide uh, verification of citizenship, because citizenship is a requirement of voting under the NVRA. So is Florida, and keep in mind that it is also at the last little footnote at the end of the document that you and I are referring to, that is posted on the Department of Justice's website. Um, it let's see, it does state that let's see. We're talking about voter registration, first-time voters, presenting documents. Hmm. Anyway, it does state that they do have to provide, uh, oh, okay, proof of citizenship, right? So maybe in Florida, Chuck, maybe we've been doing it wrong. Maybe we've been allowing people to vote who did not present uh, eligibility of citizenship, and the NVRA requires it. So have we been doing it wrong? Oh, here's the other piece, Chuck. For example, the NVRA only relates to federal elections. But it also states at the end of the document that most states have expanded it across to state elections too. And that's the big deal, right? That while this federal government only has the authority to govern over federal elections, the 44 states that are mandatorily complying with the NVRA are typically expanding the NVRA rules and regulations across their state elections too. So I don't see a place where somebody should be able to vote if they've never presented proof of citizenship, Chuck.
And I can attest to the fact that not a single person who registered to vote on my watch provided any of that. And
I'm with you.
I can't imagine that they rushed off to the supervisor's election office before they went to vote. So yeah,
I
I
assure
think
you they didn't.
something has been missing here in Florida, and hopefully one of these bills will pick that up. We're obviously talking about it. Um,
If you don't mind
and
me chiming in here or not, go ahead.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, as we look through this, there's definitely a lot of questions that we have as to how Florida is faring against the NVRA. But as we come up with some closing minutes here, we're not like totally out of it, but probably not enough time to get too much into anything else. Would you like to provide some final information for us?
I'm just wondering if we did a public records request and asked the supervisor of elections to show us the source document by which a pool of registered voters authenticated or verified their citizenship and eligibility, if the supervisor of elections could do that. And if they can't, then they're in violation of the National Voter Registration Act, the way I read it, Chuck.
Yeah, I guess that's the way I see it too. Not that we have anything other than possibly, yeah, we can do a request for information. Um, so, do you have any final shut it
That's
down
it.
kind of
I'm
comments,
done,
or
Chuck.
we're done? We're done. Well,
I'm done.
thank you, Mr. Levine, for going through this with us this morning. And thank you all again for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook at Restoring Our American Republic, or check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program. And remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.